Hey everybody, I'm Chris Eberle, down from Silicon Valley. Personally, professionally, I've been in the Valley scene for about 8, 9 years. Worked at a few different startups, including Nebo and Federated Media, and then most recently was with a company called Facebook for a few years. Left Facebook last summer to go all in on blockchain. Now worked with a few different companies, but in an operating role with Swarm Fund. With Swarm, we launched the first security token blockchain at the end of January. So our security token blockchain is built on the Stellar protocol, if that's a thing you're familiar with. And then the Swarm token itself, which we use for governance and gas for the platform, is an ERC20 or Ethereum token. So we've just launched. We are focused on tokenizing real world assets, so connecting people to invest their crypto or their fiat into assets that they might not otherwise be able to put their funds into. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, as the panel goes. It's one of those things that folks in the room that have gotten a bit into this space, like the learning curve is steep and quick, and then it's like you start talking about stuff that people don't know what you mean. Thank you for asking me to clarify. So fiat is just like, old school currency, US dollars, euros, things like that. So our platform is focused on, bring whatever currency you want. We're starting with Bitcoin and Ether, and then dollars and euros. I think especially if you look at the crypto markets of just a few weeks ago, and lots of red and pain. People are looking. If you look at people putting money into Tether or trying to, despite sort of mixed reviews, like people are sort of crying out for ways to de-risk their portfolio and sort of mitigate the volatility. Volatility is fantastic when you're 10xing, and it's brutally painful when you're not, right? So I think that's probably, I would imagine, for Piper's business, among the reasons why folks want to bring crypto into real assets. Yeah, democratizing investing is the primary mission of Swarm. We are starting towards that mission. We launched just in late January, and we're focusing on private equity, which is typically a very exclusive area of investing, right? You have to have a whole bunch of money and be in sort of a special club to be able to make private equity investments. And so we've started by bringing assets onto the blockchain and tokenizing those assets for, ultimately, we hope everybody to be able to invest in those, not just the 1%. We're limited in the ways that we can do that in the US today, so it's not immediately democratized, but fractional ownership of those things, no minimums, immediate tradability is really what we're focused on, and that's really, from what I'm aware of, only possible on the blockchain. You can go onto Swarm today, www.swarm.com. And you sign up for an account. You have to go through a KYC AML process. That's a know your customer, anti-money laundering, basically some your identification, to avoid the sort of storyline about crypto and black tar heroin and those kinds of things. To make sure that you are who you say that you are. Some additional checks if you are in the U.S. But then after that friction, you can evaluate the assets that are available on the platform. Today there are two. We're just getting going, but one is a distressed real estate fund. One is a Silicon Valley growth fund where you can buy into pre-IPO tech stocks. You put today your Bitcoin or your Ether, and future additional currencies, into the platform and commit it against those funds. Once those funds reach a minimum, which used to be $1 million, then it's locked and it goes, sort of like a Kickstarter campaign, but with real established businesses. And then you own a fractional share of that asset. You can either immediately trade your shares, like as if they were stock, to other people on the platform and recognize value that way, or look at it as a way of sort of taking your money out. And those shares will have a value, or as a shareholder, you'll enjoy returns from those assets when they come in. The returns are different by asset, but we expect quarterly-ish returns, not like, hey, maybe they'll happen every quarter, but with something like a distressed real estate fund, every quarter there'll be payment of profit back to token holders that'll look a little bit different for other things that come onto the platform.
And so how do I, if I have an asset, distressed or not, then how are you finding those assets?
Yeah, this is this is one of the sort of fascinating parts of this for me. I mean, just despite the name, like we're not a fund, we're a vehicle for the swarm, for all of us to fund things. But to get that kickstarted, we become curators for now, right? We need to find legit businesses, establish profitable entities across different verticals and bring them onto the blockchain and tokenize them. So we're really doing a lot to find, vet, and handhold those things to bring them on. But the design of the platform, and actually if you go check it out, you can actually see that the UI is there today, but we're sort of holding back to make sure that only legit projects come in. But you can tokenize your asset today by going onto the platform and providing essentially a prospectus on what it is that you were trying to raise money for. And again, we're focused now on existing profitable businesses or projects that want to raise additional capital to do more of what they were doing or go in a different direction, but really already have credibility they can show to people what they're going to do. But you would come through an intake process, provide the background and financials on who you are and what you've done, what you're expecting to do with the capital, how much you want to raise, and then things like the return schedule to folks, and then you pitch and get after it. Yeah, we think about a few different audiences. I mean, similar to what Lloyd was saying. There's sort of a buy and a sell side to the marketplace. For let's call it the everyday investor. For any investment, particularly anything in the crypto space, it really is about research and education. And maybe that sounds obvious, but it meets so many folks that have not yet been able to sort of take the time to go down the rabbit hole that I'm sure most folks in this room have done or are doing, to really understand this stuff and how it works and what the heck a blockchain is and why it makes sense. And so at a basic level, even set aside Swarm for any project that people are looking at, understand what it is, should this thing even be tokenized? Because a lot of these things, it's tokenization for tokenization's sake. And then who is the team behind it? Where do they come from? What have they done? What have they delivered? What's the diversity of their skill set and their approach? And then to look at us in the same way. And then look at what your money is actually going to go into. For us, in some ways, I think it's a little bit easier for folks to wrap their heads around because it's real world businesses, right? And you evaluate them in the same way that you would evaluate sort of a traditional investment or a stock, right? What is this entity? What has it done in the past? What are they trying to do? What assurances do they have, or do I have, or what comfort do I have that they'll actually be able to do that? So from a buyer's perspective, I think maybe it's intuitive, but I think it's really about really diligence research. On the other side, we're actually talking to a lot of folks in the private wealth community, like family offices and such, right? Have very large pools of capital that they are already able to invest into things in the categories that we're bringing on to Swarm, but with a whole bunch of restrictions and inflexibility, right? You have to have massive amounts of minimums. There's only certain windows in which you can go and make your investment, and your capital's locked up for a very long time, right? There's no liquidity, zippy liquidity, right? So we're offering a way for those folks to do the same things that they're doing today in a legal and regulatory compliant way, but with no minimums, with instant tradability, and way more flexibility. Still a legal process, still lawyers, but no paper.
What would you say is the typical profile of your user for all three of you? So young, older, tech savvy, not tech savvy. Who are they?
I can start. I mean, it's all over the place. I can tell you, since launching our alpha in January, we have that segment of our audience that we know a bit more about. We've got around 5,000 people from how many countries? 53 countries-ish, all over the world. And actually, some of the first folks to sign up were in their early 20s, which I found really encouraging. But all ages, genders, from all over the place. So it's, it really is this diverse set of folks, which, the proof will be in the pudding when the actual dollars start flowing in both directions. But really encouraging to me is this is about democratizing and not having this just be about a bunch of, frankly, white dudes in suits somewhere. It's really a diverse cast of people who have come to sign up to try to get involved.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for us, I said we launched a security token blockchain, so we have securities. So there's two key components to this. One, every individual asset that launches on the Swarm platform is its own token, is its own offering, and it has to have the correct regulatory wrapper, if you will, for what that is. So for the first two, we expect they'll be Reg D securities. I say expect because the actual process for any finance buffs in the audience is once the minimum is achieved, then a vehicle is established to actually make that investment, and then that is actually established with the SEC as a security. So it's a process that we are prepared to follow. We just not reached that sort of piece yet. So every single one of these things is a security in the United States and has to be registered as such. The other piece of the U.S. thing that I touched on earlier is the accredited investor bid. This one's really tough for me on a personal level because it's one of the big things in the country in which I live that stands in the way of us and our mission of connecting people to investing and really democratizing investing. And if you don't know the regulations, you have to have $1 million liquid, meaning like not tied up in your house or anything, access to $1 million, and or you as an individual have made $200,000 a year or more for each of the last 3 years and expect to continue, or if you're married, 300 grand a year, back and forward. Which excludes the majority of Americans from, not just from swarm, but from investing into any security, which for lack of a better word is shitty. That is a good word for it. But for us means, we have to really follow the letter of the law because we want to actually be able to, be in business to do these things. That's just in the US. We have 6 other jurisdictions around the world where we've been working as an organization for the past year or so to establish the right regulatory relationships to simply say what we want to do here, we want to do this stuff right. And so, imagine a world 6 months, a year from now where there's a real estate fund out of Hong Kong that comes onto Swarm and we want investors from the US, for example, to be able to invest into that. That's a complex world that we need to leave, but so we invest in legal, a great law firm and regulatory partners to do that. So that's a process. Yeah, I fully agree. We were talking before this, in 2018 is the year when I think a lot of things will get sorted. I think for traditional lending and if I may, like investing players as well, I think the crypto blockchain world sort of looks a little bit different. I think on the investing side, in the private equity space at least, this is a multi-trillion-dollar thing, right? Like $2-something trillion in assets under management last year, I believe, in the private equity space. And I honestly believe that prioritizing access and opening these things up to more people can actually significantly grow that number. And we're actually talking to a couple of bigger players in the private equity space about locking arms and trying to do this stuff together. And really, no joke, like have an all ships rise kind of approach and bridge that sort of that world with the new world, which I'm pretty psyched about. From a lending perspective, totally agree with Piper. I think the smaller players are excited to innovate, pivot their businesses, and figure out how to get involved and grow. And the big banks are scared, and they should be. Right, like stuff you see with locking down credit card purchases and stuff like that. I mean, they're scared because their world is a changing, and where they've always prioritized at the end of the day what's best for the bank. Something that prioritizes access for people is obviously, or I tend to believe, over time going to get more and more support from people. So they're going to have to change things that are long ingrained and very profitable, and that's going to be fun to be a part of. Cool. So that's like 6 questions. No, it's awesome, man. No, great question. So let's chat after about some of that stuff. So I don't monopolize the whole time, but I think the first piece around lockup periods and liquidity is a great question. And the way that we I guess provide liquidity in that context is when you invest into one of these opportunities, one of these funds on Swarm, you're converting whatever your currency is into a token, these dollar pegged tokens, right? So you own those in the same way that you own a share of stock. Those represent, in this case, fiat US dollars that are converted and supplied to those assets to go off and do whatever they're going to do with their business, right? In the fiat piece of that, there's capital that is locked up. There's the sort of the proper regulatory paths that follow, and then back on the platform, there's a token that you own. And if you want to trade that token to somebody else on the platform tomorrow who wants to buy it from you, there's a market for that. And then within that realm of
of investor accreditation and KYC AML, we're able to provide that, like sort of that instant transfer and capability, while also on sort of the other side of the wall, having things operate the way that traditional capital operate. Maybe one quick, but yeah, let's chat more. On the token standard stuff, so the Swarm token itself is a utility that we use to operate the network. It's gas, it's incentives, it's governance. And then actually the securities are actually done on a Stellar-based blockchain that we built with SRC20, which is actually, from what I'm aware of, the only live and actively used security token standard. Although I'm curious to see when SC20 is actually deployed, what we can do, and hopefully we can work together with those guys to do some awesome things. Great question.